Well, good morning, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
It's a beautiful, beautiful day. Now, Harley, we have to start with something really, really serious. I know you have a really serious company. It's a juggernaut here in Canada.
Thank you.
And today's a really, really important day for us to talk about some serious business. So, Merle's in the audience.
My mom's here right now. Where's my mom? Where is she? I think she's in the back somewhere. There she is.
There's Merle.
So it's my mom's birthday. Would you guys please help me sing happy birthday to her? Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Merle. Happy birthday to you. I love you, Mom. Happy birthday. So happy you're here with us. And thank you all for humoring me with that. It's kind of ridiculous, but it's Startupfest. We can do whatever we want.
We totally can. Happy birthday, Merle. So this is great. I'm so thrilled that we get to have a conversation. And we're going to make this a little enjoyable for everyone who is here listening to us. So I think a whole lot of people in this room and across the country, indeed, want to hear a little bit about your story and your entrepreneurial journey. So can you share with the audience, how did you get started? You've often said, an entrepreneur, anyone can be an entrepreneur. And if you can find a problem where you are also willing to find the solution, you're an entrepreneur. So talk to us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, it's actually, some of you may remember this, but in the 80s, there was an ad campaign from Nike. And it was a brilliant move on Nike's part. What happened was, Nike decided to redefine what an athlete was. Previously, an athlete was anyone that played a sport, usually professionally or semi-professionally. And what Nike said was actually, an athlete is anyone that has a body. So if you have a body, you are therefore an athlete, which means that wearing Nike clothing or merchandise was for everyone. And actually, I think the same way about entrepreneurship. I think that if you have ambition, you are an entrepreneur. So back in the very early 1990s in Montreal, I was 13 years old, and I wanted to be a DJ. I thought being a DJ was something that was really cool, but I didn't know how to DJ. I looked like I was 8 years old. No one would hire me. And so the answer to my problem was to start my own DJ company and hire myself. And that was really my first entrepreneurial venture. And I've been trying to do entrepreneurial stuff and build companies ever since. But I've always sort of looked at entrepreneurship as a way to solve problems. You and I backstage were talking about our families both being immigrants and to Canada. And actually, my family came here in '56 from Hungary. And they also became entrepreneurs, although they didn't articulate it that way. They didn't call themselves entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. They just tried to survive. And they, my grandfather, show of hands, how many of you are from Montreal in the crowd? So there's a farmer's market called the Jean Talon Farmer's Market. You guys know it? So there's still a little egg stand there called Le Capitaine. And my grandfather sold eggs for the entirety of his life as sort of an entrepreneur, even though he didn't call it that. So the way that I became to entrepreneurship was because I wanted to do something that wasn't accessible to me. And the way my grandfather did it 50 years earlier was he needed to put food on the table.
Right. I think that that's a story that resonates with most, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and we were talking about starting your own venture because the opportunity to be hard just wasn't there for your grandfather or for my own parents. But Shopify today is an international company. It's an international company grounded, started, and growing out of Canada. And if you're a startup entrepreneur, you're not only thinking about how to start your business. I'm the Minister of Small Business and Export Promotion, so it's my job to help companies start up. It's to help them scale up, and it's to help them scale up by going into the international marketplace, by accessing new markets. So what advice would you give to companies, entrepreneurs, who are looking to grow, but really who are not only looking to grow, but looking to scale up? What advice would you give them? How do you do it? How can you be successful growing your company?
So I'll say this on the record in front of you, Minister, in front of our friends here. I do not believe Shopify would be where we are today had we not built it in Canada. I think that eventually, Canada is unequivocally Shopify's competitive advantage. And what I mean by that is, I think that there is this, how many in the crowd are sort of quote-unquote tech entrepreneurs? Okay, so if you're a tech entrepreneur, as I am, one of the things you often hear early on as you're beginning to raise money, as you're beginning to scale your business is, at some point you're going to have to move to the valley. I think that is total bullshit. You can say words like that, but I can't. I think that's total bullshit. I actually believe that if Shopify would have moved to the Valley, and there was some pressure to move there, we would not be the leader we are in our space. I actually think what we need more of in Canada is we need more ambition. We need more of a philosophy around building the greatest companies in the world that happen to be based in Canada, not Canada's best companies. And our view was, let's build the best piece of software to help people sell stuff anywhere, online or offline or anywhere else, but let's do it from Canada. And what that meant was we were able to get better access to talent than we think anyone else could around the world. It meant we had incredible loyalty and tenure of our staff. And it meant we were able to be really, really focused. Peers of mine and friends of mine that have moved to the Valley, I found often what ends up happening is the second they move there, they get distracted. And the second thing that happens is the average tenure of their team dwindles. It goes from like 48 months to 12 months because there's so many options for these people to work at. And I think whether you're building a company in Ottawa or Saskatchewan, like our friends at Skip the Dishes, or you're building a company in Montreal or Trois-Rivières, if you are the best company to work for in your particular geography, you will be able to get the greatest talent. And that, I mean, objectively relative to talent anywhere in the world. But I think what I think is really important about Canada right now is we just got to raise the level of ambition. And I want to see fewer Series E's and more IPOs. And I want more headquarters in Canada from Canadian companies.
Well, I couldn't agree with that objective anymore. So you're right, a hand to that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I think about the work that we're doing as a federal government. We are creating the condition for companies to be competitive in Canada, for them to start in Canada, for them to grow in Canada. Talent, you're absolutely right, is critical. So whether it is creating global skills so that we can bring in international talent quickly and add to your company's talent, or actually putting out a Canada training benefit that helps your employees continue to get trained up and skilled up so that they are the best employees that you can possibly have, are some of the things that we're doing, because it is all of those pieces, including financing and capital, that is needed for entrepreneurs to grow and to remain here in Canada and to grow internationally, to grow globally.
And it's never actually been better now. I mean, in 2010, we raised our Series A. It was our first round of financing for Shopify. It was a $7 million round. And honestly, it was led by an American venture fund, Bessemer Venture Partners. At the time, there just wasn't that much capital available in Canada. That is totally different now. I mean, it's only been 9 years, but in 9 years, we have way more venture funds, we have way more angel investors, we have way more of an appetite to get involved. We have government that actually is saying we want to help entrepreneurs by reducing barriers to entry and reducing friction. 2019, I mean, we're all at Startupfest here in Montreal right now, but 2019 is basically Startupfest across Canada all year long.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely fantastic, and you're right. We now are number 2 to the US in terms of venture capital funding. The federal government itself has put out $450 million alone in the last 3.5 years, just in venture capital funding that is going to raise follow-on funding by the private sector and to incent angel investors. But growing a business, and we've been talking about your success, a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners I talk about also talk about the failures and what the failures and the learnings of failures meant to them in pivoting their business or actually helping them to their eventual success. So can you talk to this audience a bit about the failures and what is it that you have learned along the way that helped you and helped Shopify grow in the way that it's growing today?
Yeah. So I'll take a second just to talk about myself for a second, because I've had a lot of failures, but probably the biggest failure that I've made as an entrepreneur and as a leader, and I'm sure people in this crowd, you guys think about this as well, many of you, because when you're forged in the fires of entrepreneurship, you tend to want to do everything yourself. And you tend to believe that the best way to get anything done is just to do it on your own. And that is absolutely correct in the early days. But at a certain point in your business, you have to start hiring people that are better than you are at things that you're not good at. And I think we as entrepreneurs and we as founders, we tend to end up hiring people for their lack of weaknesses as opposed to their strengths. The best people I've ever hired at Shopify, we're about 5,000 people at Shopify today. The best people that I've ever hired in the last decade have been people that had some serious weaknesses, but also some incredible strengths. And the important piece there is figure out what their weaknesses are so you can help them with it or you can mitigate it, but don't not hire them because they have a bunch of very big weaknesses. We like this idea of a T-shaped sort of expertise where they can go broad, sort of shallow, but they can go deep into one specific area. And I had a tough time in the early days, frankly, because of ego and insecurity, hiring people that were so much better than me. And actually now, I'm very fortunate to hire people that are almost always better than I am. So that was my own personal journey has been a lot of sort of managing my own ego and managing my own insecurities. And by the way, if you are an entrepreneur and you need help, the greatest thing that we've ever done at Shopify, and for myself, is we've had coaches on staff at Shopify since the early days. We had a coach on staff before we had a CMO. That's true. So if you need help, there are incredible coaches out there that can help you. And as I begin to meet more very successful entrepreneurs, one of the common denominators is that they all have incredible coaches. And they're all vulnerable enough to say, I need some help. From a company perspective, I would say the biggest change that we made at Shopify was that we started out by helping small businesses sell online. And at a certain point, what we realized was that the future of retail, the future of commerce, is not just going to be online. It's going to be online, offline. It'll be on Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat. It'll be on marketplaces like eBay or Amazon. And that if we want to be at the company that builds the world's first retail operating system, we need to enable anyone that wants to sell a product to sell anywhere they want. And so today, we have 100,000 merchants that use us to sell in a brick and mortar store. We're the Instagram partner for Instagram commerce.
That's a clap, by the way.
Is that? That's, yeah. But the biggest major pivot we did is most people still believe that what we do at Shopify is we enable e-commerce. And in truth, we enable commerce anywhere, whether that's online or offline or anywhere in between. And what's kind of interesting is that although we focus our business on really small entrepreneurs initially, we now have some of the greatest brands on the planet, from Allbirds to Bombas to Kylie Cosmetics to Fashion Nova, using Shopify to sell as well. And so we've not only gone well beyond e-commerce, we've also stretched the type of people that can use Shopify as well. And merchants have now sold about $100 billion of products on our platform.
That's really great. You just touched on this, and I'm going to go back to this point because I think it's an important one to make, and that is about the ambition. What you talked about there is Shopify taking from a platform that gives small businesses a place and a marketplace to the overall ambition, and that overall ambition, again, is grounded in Canada. I don't think we can say it more enough, and I, of course, am always very open ears to how we can always do this better, which is to create an environment in Canada that allows for that big ambition. So talk again about the big ambition, because in a very practical or tangible way, someone in this audience is going to say, you know what, I'm at that point right now where I am growing, where I am raising that money, and I am making that pivotal decision. How can you help them make that decision that is grounded in Canada in a bit of a practical way?
Yeah, look, I've gone on record before publicly to say that I think we need more HQs in Canada, not more branch plants. Now, I've been criticized saying if a major Silicon Valley company opens up an office in Canada, it's not a bad thing. It does create jobs. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. What I'm saying is that I want way more HQs here. I hope there are thousands of Shopifys that are created in Canada, headquartered in Canada. I also feel like the Canadian sensibility is fairly modest. And I think the modesty, for the most part, serves us very, very well. It means we can be humble in our approaches to technology. It means that we can be transparent about how things are going. If it's going well, we'll say it's going well. If it's going bad, we'll admit that it's going poorly. But it also lends itself to us being a country that tends to prefer to be acquired than to do the acquiring. And actually, I'll put this out there as an offer to anyone. If anyone in this room is thinking about selling their company right now, please get in touch with me. I will convince you against that. I mean that. And I really believe that the way to do it is for us. Let me give you a quick story. 5 years ago on, I think it was Bloomberg, our CFO at the time, his name is Russ, went on Bloomberg, and it was U.S. Bloomberg, and the reporter said, so Mr. Jones, you're the CFO of Shopify, when do you think Google is going to buy you? And Russ said, that's the wrong question, sir. The question you should be asking us is when we're going to buy Google. Now, of course, it was tongue-in-cheek. At the time, Google was way more valuable than we were. They still are more valuable than we are today, although the delta is closing, which I love. But that's the way we've always thought about things, that what if we are a company that thinks about buying those companies as opposed to always the company that thinks about being acquired ourselves. I think that we have the most talented, smartest, most ambitious people in Canada. We just have to own our greatness a little bit more. We just have to admit to ourselves that we want to own the podium like they do in the Olympics. We want to own the podium in entrepreneurship as well. And I believe Shopify is the greatest company on the planet in our space. Full stop. I should believe that.
Yes.
And I believe some of you are building what is going to be the greatest company in your own spaces. But you have to believe that. And I think Canada's time to shine from a business, entrepreneurship, startup perspective is right now. And I've never been more, as an angel investor, but also as a leader of a company that's headquartered here, I've never been more inspired of what is happening right now. But any of you that are thinking about your next 5 years, 10x it and see where that takes you. And I think that's the way to look at things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, owning the podium, really interesting that you say that, because the federal government put together 6 economic tables. And these are people that come from the private sector that did some work in a number of areas where Canada is punching above its weight, where really owning the podium actually is within our reach. So clean tech, it is agri-tech, AI, we're here in Montreal, and oceans technologies. So there are a number of areas where we really are strong. So owning the podium, helping Canadian companies scale up is something that we're very, very committed to doing at the federal government, working with our companies here in Canada. You also talked about a point in there around the diversity and the strength of Canada's diversity. I love the story that you tell about your wife and about how she didn't see herself as an entrepreneur. Like many women entrepreneurs who are business owners today may not be seeing themselves as the amazing growth-oriented companies that they are and can be. So talk a little bit about that experience of the importance of female entrepreneurs, needing female entrepreneurs, Indigenous entrepreneurs, newcomer entrepreneurs, being able to see themselves as the Canadian juggernauts that they have the potential to be.
It's something that I'm thinking a lot about right now for a bunch of reasons, but particularly, first of all, Canada is a country of immigrants. Immigrants are naturally, organically exceptional entrepreneurs. Why? One, no one gives a shit about us. So we have to do things for ourselves. I'm sorry, it's true. Number 2, we're very resourceful because no one's going to help us. Number 3, we are makers. We do stuff, we make stuff, whether it's writing code or it's making delicious food or it's selling eggs or whatever that might be. I think immigrants actually are by nature necessitated to be really good entrepreneurs. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think that this connotation or this identity of entrepreneurs...
I'm going to interrupt you there for
please.
a second. So, as a minister and as a politician, you know how I learned my best skill to being a politician? Delivering Chinese food, growing up in my family's Chinese food restaurant.
Really?
So to your point.
That's exactly right. Right. So your family probably may have not been able to get a job in the restaurant, so they built their own restaurant. Right. That is the immigrant sensibility, and I think that is so wonderful about Canada. On the identification of entrepreneurship, this is something that's really personal to me because I do believe that many of you in the crowd. Startupfest, probably by the very nature you're here, you probably do believe you are entrepreneurs. But there are so many incredible people out there doing entrepreneurial things that won't admit to themselves they're entrepreneurs because in their mind, their version of an entrepreneur looks like a white dude in Silicon Valley wearing a hoodie and flip-flops. And I think that is ridiculous. So the story that we talked about with my wife, my wife's an ice cream entrepreneur. She has this amazing ice cream shop called Sunday School. And she didn't actually self-identify as an entrepreneur, not because she didn't feel that she had the right to. It's just, it wasn't something that was in her lexicon. It wasn't something that she would self-identify as. But as soon as she began to call herself an entrepreneur, something remarkable happened. all of a sudden she began to create a tribe for herself of other incredible female entrepreneurs. All of a sudden she had a community of people that were helping one another. All of a sudden people were reaching out to her saying, I love what you said about this. Can we talk more about how we can get less air into ice cream, which is a big deal in the ice cream industry in Ottawa. I actually believe that by self-identifying ourselves as entrepreneurs, we immediately open the floodgates to so many people around us congregating, communicating, and helping one another. And I think the connotation of entrepreneur absolutely has to change. Here's something that most people don't know. We have over 800,000 merchants on Shopify. And they range, again, from people like Kanye and Bombas socks to small entrepreneurs that sell a couple products every single day. The majority of merchants on Shopify are female, not men. Female. It's true. And the majority of merchants on Shopify are female. And so that actually is remarkable and not that surprising. But I think one of the things that we have to think about as entrepreneurs and leaders in this country is how do we encourage more people to do it? People assume that entrepreneurship is one of two things. It's either complicated or expensive. It used to be complicated and it used to be expensive. And now because of software like ours, but many others as well, it's not complicated and it's not expensive. But we have to give people a proverbial kick in the butt to say, just try it. And my belief is that in the future, what will happen is, in the same way that 10 years ago, someone in your family may describe their hobby. A grandfather of yours, an aunt of yours, a sister of yours has a hobby. They make stuff in their workshop, or they make beautiful jewelry at their kitchen table. I think in the future, people will begin to commercialize those hobbies and turn those things into entrepreneurship. And I think where it's going to lead is that all of us as a community, as a country, we will all find our life's work in a much more compelling way than we are right now.
I think you're already seeing that because you're seeing those very entrepreneurs through Shopify. But that proverbial kick in the butt, well, let me tell you a little bit about that kick in the butt. So I have the enormous privilege of serving all of you and the businesses in this country. And I have a mandate from the Prime Minister to double the number of female entrepreneurs by 2025. I lead a $2 billion investment strategy to do that. And we're doing that in a number of ways, like giving greater access to capital for female entrepreneurs, creating ecosystems of support, creating, gathering real data so that we can make future decisions based on what works and what doesn't work based on, evidence and data. But why are we doing this? Of course, it's the right thing to do. I'm going to throw an interesting stat out at you. 99% of Canadian businesses are small and medium-sized businesses. What percentage do you think is female-owned or female-led? Yell it out. 60. I can go home. No. 16. 1-6. 16% of all of our small and medium-sized businesses are women-owned or women-led, which is why we need to do this. But here's the ROI. I'm not particularly a numbers person, but I told you it's a $2 billion investment. The studies show us that we can add $150 billion to the Canadian economy by 2026. That's only 1 year after I'm supposed to double the number of female entrepreneurs by 2025. So adding $150 billion to the Canadian economy with a deliberate investment on a women's entrepreneurship strategy, to me, that kind of sounds like pretty good ROI, right? I see lots of women in this room. So I'm very hopeful, and it's not even hopeful. I mean, I got your back. The Prime Minister's got your back. We're going to help all of us and all of you be successful as Canadians, Canadian businesses and Canadian startups.
And I can vouch for that. I mean, I've had the great pleasure and privilege to spend quite a bit of time with Minister Ng, and I can tell you that we have a government right now that cares deeply about entrepreneurship, cares deeply about diversity, and cares deeply about removing roadblocks. In fact, in many ways, Shopify's whole mandate is to reduce the learning curve and level the playing field for entrepreneurs at a global level. I think you guys are doing that in Canada for us, and we're greatly appreciative that you're doing that.
Well, your success is our success. And small businesses are absolutely the backbone of the Canadian economy. You are the innovators, you're the idea creators, you're the job makers. You creating jobs that is going to create it's going to create economic prosperity for all of us. It's going to be able to afford all of the things that we all find and hold dear here in Canada. So I've got the very last question. It's a hard question, but here it goes. In hindsight, what is the biggest mistake that taught you the most?
Wow. Not listening to my mom. Really, though, listen to your moms. They know what they're doing. Yeah.
There we go, Merle.
Yeah.
And it's on tape too, so this is great. You can play it back
By the
to
way,
him regularly.
She's one of the grandmother judges, so if you're pitching at the grandmother's judges tent, my mother is going to be there, and she's tough. She's really, really tough. I talked a little bit about sort of getting out of your own way and sort of ego and insecurity, and surrounding yourselves with people that I think are smarter than you, hiring people that don't have necessarily a lack of weaknesses, but really have incredible strengths. I would say beyond that, one of the things that has been incredibly valuable to me, Mitch Joel is here somewhere. I don't know if he's in the back. He may be backstage if he's not in here. Mitch Joel is an incredible agency owner and entrepreneur here in Montreal. From an very early stage in my life, well before Shopify even existed, before anyone even knew who I was, I began writing letters and phone calls and emails to people that I today call mentors. And I think the concept of mentorship has actually been quite lost. People assume that they'll refer to a mentor as someone that they meet with once a year for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. That is not a mentor. I've been able to cultivate these incredible mentors in my life that I meet with on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, and some of them are not entrepreneurs. They just happen to be really, really good spouses, or really, really good fathers. Before I had our first child, I tried to figure out who in my life did I really admire as a great dad, as a great father, and I reached out to them. I think that every single one of you here probably would, if you don't already have mentors in your life, would really benefit from that. And the way to do it is to find 5 or 10 people that you really admire and ask them if you can just buy them a coffee. Mentorship is something that I believe really strongly in, and I don't think enough entrepreneurs have mentors. We have advisors, we have people to bounce ideas off of, but a mentor is someone where there's a mutual relationship where you say, I'm going to commit to you and you need to commit to me. And what I found is more times than not, these mentors actually will give you some of their time because at some point someone gave them some time as well. And one of the great things that I did, and I do it a lot more now than I did in the early years, but it's to cultivate this incredible group of mentors. And I would extend that also to a tribe. Many of you don't live in big cities, or you live in sort of suburbs of big cities. Creating a tribe of people that are just like you, that are thinking like you in an interesting way about business or entrepreneurship, where you meet every Friday evening or you meet every Tuesday morning for breakfast. Creating your own tribe wherever you are, I think is a very powerful thing to do. And in Canada, what I've seen is when people create these tribes, these communities on their own that are self-propelling, they end up all sort of lifting all the boats in the sea. So I think mentorship and creating a tribe of people that are going through the same thing you are is really important. Entrepreneurship is really, really it's lonely sometimes. Do you guys agree with that? Like sometimes you're just sitting there and you think that, am I the only one that has these thoughts about how big of a loser I am? Honestly, we all have those thoughts. And by the way, I hate to say it, but it doesn't go away when you grow a bigger company. You still have a little bit of those insecure thoughts. But when you have a community of people around you that can lift you up, that can remind you that actually keep going and keep persevering, that is incredibly important. And so that's what I would say.
That is really, really exceptional advice. And I would venture to say that probably the hardest thing for anyone to do this is that very first step. So asking for help, finding that person, but beyond finding that person, picking up the phone, writing that email, and asking for help so that you can actually begin creating that kind of trust relationship in that mentorship that becomes so valuable to you, not only today, but in the years to come. So, and for those, it's paying it forward like you're doing today.
Yeah. So before we go, I know we only have 10 seconds left, but I was going to ask you something backstage, but because I want to hold you accountable to it, I'm going to ask you in front of all these people.
Okay.
Is that cool?
That's cool.
Say yes. So one of the things that I think a lot about, and we think a lot about at Shopify, is that it seems like there's one company that really owns search, one tech company owns search in the world, and that's Google. And there's one company, for the most part, that really owns social in the world, and that's Facebook and all their divisions and all their acquisitions. There is not a company yet that owns entrepreneurship in the world, and Shopify wants to be the entrepreneurship company. My ask of you, Minister, is that I want Canada to become the entrepreneurship country, and I'd like your help doing that over the next couple of years.
You got it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.